Good night, Elon.
Hi.
Hi.
Exactly.
Thank you. John and Elon, they will share with us their views on the future. Both are industrial leaders committed to foster innovation, supporting change with trust for the power of technology in helping us to solve problems and achieve progress. But before we start, please take note on the side of the code number that you can type on the Slido to send us questions to our extraordinary and unique guest. Let's start from a personal note from John. John, how and when did you meet with Elon?
We met in Italy, in Sicily, in 2014 after the World Cup, and we had immediately a very interesting conversation that we carried forward over the years, and the themes were artificial intelligence, human-machine interfaces, the future of our species in a multi-planet system. And what's been really good over the years is to see how that conversation and what we had discussed then ended up in actual real activities. After that, OpenAI was started, Neuralink was started, and many other projects and ventures that Elon has achieved since.
And Elon, what memories you have of your conversation with John?
Well, it's similar. I think we're talking about those subjects, and I just thought that John was a great person and quite insightful. But yes, at that point, we were really, Tesla was small, and SpaceX was relatively small. There was no Neuralink, no boring company. So I think it was just a wide-ranging intellectual conversation, and I was just impressed with John as a person.
Think about roots. There are similarities between Elon Musk and John Elkann. Both grew up in developing countries, in South Africa and Brazil. Both have one brother and one sister, strong affection for grandfather. Both are engineering-minded. Elon, what is the source of your inspiration?
The source of my inspiration, I'd say, is somewhat philosophical. So I think that the thing we should be aiming for is increasing the scope and scale of human civilization, so as to best ask the right questions for the answer, which is reality, or the universe. And so if you accept that premise, then we should work to ensure the long-term survival and prosperity of humanity, of consciousness, and we should seek to extend that consciousness beyond Earth to other planets, eventually other star systems. That is the nature of my philosophy.
John, what does it mean to grow up in changing places, cultures, languages? How that contributed to shape your character?
Well, it definitely broadens one's scope in terms of the possibility of being exposed to different cultures, different countries, different people. And as I reflect on the luck of my upbringing in multiple countries, what really stays with me is that we generally tend to compare one place to another, what is better. And I think that that's a mistake. We really need to appreciate what's different. And there's no doubt by complementing diversity, we end up getting to better outcomes. And I also think that having studied here in Torino engineering and having been living here since, the element of roots is also important. So as much as one wants to extend ourselves in planet Earth, but beyond, the roots are important and are an important factor that I've come to appreciate more over the years.
Exploration means Moon, Mars, and beyond, but also the art of chasing curiosity. Elon, you are committed to take humans to Mars. What comes after Mars?
Well, I think it's more than just exploration. It's actually extending the scope and scale of consciousness, and the length of time that consciousness will exist as we know it is greatly extended by being a multi-planet species. So it is much harder to go and establish a self-sustaining city on Mars than it is to simply explore Mars or go for a visit. I think we need to turn Mars into another planet with life as we know it. And it's the only real possible location in the solar system where that is possible, where that can be done. So only one planet, really, Mars. So if we are able to establish a self-sustaining civilization on Mars, I think this will go a long way towards securing the long-term survival of humanity. And as I said, it would increase the scope and scale of consciousness and would drive the development of new technologies that would ultimately enable us to go further, certainly further in the solar system, but ultimately to go to other star systems and just go out there and find out what's going on, you know? Are there other civilizations that existed perhaps hundreds of millions of years ago or a billion years ago that maybe lasted for a long time? It might have lasted for millions of years. Whereas if you look at human civilization, it's only been around for about 5,000 years if you consider civilization to have begun from when the first writing existed. First writing in any meaningful sense existed about 5,000, maybe 6,000 years ago. So it's a very short period of time, considering that Earth is 4.5 billion years old and the universe is 13.8 billion years old. So, anyway, so I think we'd learn a lot about just kind of like what the heck is going on. Where, just we ultimately want to go out there and see the other star systems in our galaxy. I'm not sure we will ever get beyond our galaxy, but we can at least see what's happening in the great many stars that are in our galaxy. Maybe we'll meet some alien life that we can talk to. That would be interesting.
We're gonna see. Thank you, Elon. John, what is your long-term ambition?
I think just if we're able, the real threshold to be able to get to other places is transportation. So if one could actually invent teleportation, that would allow us to travel much easier and be able to explore definitely our solar system and potentially meet with other inhabitants, as Elon was mentioning. So definitely if teleportation was something we could invent, that would be a great progress.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Looking forward to it. Speaking about business, you both are in charge of several businesses. Elon, we speak about Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, Starlink, and others. John, Stellantis, Ferrari, and Exo, that means CNH, Jedi, reinsurance companies, Juventus, and others. Elon, the question for you is, you mostly created new companies. What is your recipe for that?
What is my recipe?
Yeah. To create.
Well, I think it's quite difficult to create a new company and have it be successful. And generally, I do not recommend creating new companies unless you feel very compelled to do so. Starting a new company and making it successful, like a friend of mine has a good thing for that, which is it's like eating glass and staring into the abyss. So that sounds like something you want to do, then start a company. So it's quite difficult. But I mean, the basics of starting a company are, you have to have an idea that is compelling, or you think that could be a product that could be very valuable to the world. And then you've got to find a lot of talented people and convince them to do this new thing, because talented people are already doing something. So you have to convince them to do this new thing. And that can be it's very hard to do that. And then you have to build the company up. And a company goes through a life cycle, like just a sort of like a human or like any animal. It starts off very simple, like one cell, then you get a few more cells, and then you get some organ differentiation, you start growing arms and legs, and they become like a baby, and then a toddler, a child and teenager, adults. The life cycle of a company is very much like that of a creature, and you have to reinvent the company at every stage. So this is why some companies get to be a large size and some do not. It's because you actually have to reconfigure the country at the various stages of its life cycle.
John, you mostly transformed existing companies. What is your recipe?
I think I've been mainly exposed professionally to two industries, the car industry and the newspaper industry, which are old industries. So they come from the 19th century. And I studied engineering 20 years ago here in Torino, where two things were very true then. One was the internet and the other one was mobile. And that led to incredible things that happened on the back of it. Whilst I was very much immersed in two industries who were very much suffering from structural reasons and a lot of headwinds. And I think that what was useful was that in parallel to what I was doing, I also had the opportunity of being exposed to what was happening in other industries. And as I reflect about company, and our companies are old, they have more than 100 centuries. This moment in time and the decade we're in is a very exciting one for the opportunity of renewal that it gives. And you can see that transformation is incredibly, if you are very committed to it, which is really the difficulty in a company which has very strong embedded habits, is able to give you great benefits. Having said that, it is incredibly painful. So I'm also happy that we're not only trying to transform 19th century companies and 21st century companies, but also since 2017 with Exor Seeds, participating in new companies and trying to build 21st century companies.
Thank you. Speaking about business, we are in front of a public today of startup, an audience of leaders, mostly young, that take risk, overcome problems, and look for solutions. You are both roller coasters, used to go from risk to successes. John, you have survived 3 different crises. What does it mean for you, that?
Well, to some extent, more than only 3. And I think that being an entrepreneur and taking an active role in engaging in an enterprise has risk in it, which is why it's very hard, as Elon was mentioning before. On the other hand, I think that it's very important to be aware that you are on a roller coaster, and one of the mistakes that one should not do is when you're on the low, be depressed, or when you're on the high, be overexcited. And if you're able to balance that and stay very true to what you're doing and what you're doing with the organization, that's extremely important. I also believe that having been very close to very complicated situation, and when you really see an organization that could end its life because you don't have resources to continue, or for other troubles, but generally they end up being financial difficulties. It is very important to have very strong conviction and find all kind of resourcefulness to go along. And that's something I've experimented many times, and I recall very well being with Elon in 2019, which was definitely a tough year for him. And you were very calm, and I think that's important, to be very, very steady.
Yeah, speaking about you, Elon, the 2019 and also 2008, when many people wrote off Tesla. How could you reverse the situation then?
Yeah, that was a very difficult time. I think, like John, we've gone through many difficult times. The Tesla has come close to bankruptcy, I don't know, maybe half a dozen times over its life. And actually, probably the most serious one was 2008 and 2009, because Tesla was just a very small company making, in low volume, a sports car that was kind of expensive, and it was basically the only electric car being built at the time. So it was very difficult to get customers and very difficult to get investors. And although I had money from PayPal, I had actually run out of the money from PayPal. So I personally had no money left. In fact, I had to borrow money from friends to pay the rent. I didn't even have a house. So it was pretty intense. And like in that case, we actually raised the money to keep the company going on Christmas Eve of 2008. And that was the last hour of the last day that it was possible to raise money. And if that call had not gone well, then we would have gone bankrupt. That was pretty intense. And then the next most intense time was, the 2018, 2019, when we were struggling to get the Model 3 to volume production. And so we were really in a very tough situation. Because the thing that's, I think a lot of people don't fully appreciate is that while it's actually relatively easy to come up with prototypes and show cars, it is very difficult to achieve volume manufacturing. The notable thing I think about Tesla is not so much that Tesla made electric cars, because others have made electric cars, but rather that Tesla was able to achieve volume manufacturing, I think, as the first US company to achieve volume manufacturing in 100 years, after Chrysler in the 20s. So the difficulty of this cannot be overstated. Production is staggeringly hard, and I have a great deal of respect for people companies and people that are able to do volume production and make good products and actually be prosperous. It's very difficult. So it's just one thing after another. And I'd say probably the longest extended period of pain that I've had is from 2017 to 2019. Just about 3 years there. Actually, it was great talking to John, actually. John was very supportive. So
And on that manufacturing, we are very happy as Comau to be part of how you guys sorted it out.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Comau was great. So, yeah, but very, very tough. You know, the thing about that's one of the things that makes cars especially difficult for manufacturing is that there are on the order of 10,000 unique parts or processes in vehicle production. And if even one of those has a problem, you cannot make the car. So the production moves as fast as the slowest, least lucky, least competent of, let's say, at least 10,000 unique parts and processes, some of which are within your control and some of which are at suppliers. So it's just very hard. I was sleeping in the factory for quite a while there.
Thank you, Elon. A crucial topic for all of us today is energy. We know that electric energy is the future for cars. And we know very well that we have to cut emission. But how can we produce enough energy to sustain growth? Elon.
Yeah, I think the long term, we'll get most of our energy from solar and wind, in addition to geothermal and hydropower. And I would say also people should really think positively of nuclear energy. I'm talking about just traditional nuclear energy that's well engineered. I think these days recently I've been surprised by a movement away from nuclear energy, but I think actually the reality is it is actually quite safe, and we should have more nuclear energy, or at least not shut down the nuclear power plants that we already have. My considered opinion is that they do not present a danger. But there's a strong movement to get rid of nuclear power plants, which I think is not good, especially if they are to be replaced with coal power plants. I think the evidence is very clear that there's much more of a health risk from coal power plants than there is from nuclear.
And John, how to face the challenge of the need for more energy today?
Well, I think that energy is important for us to be able to continue and develop as we have. And we have two important issues to tackle. One is price, and we're seeing how energy prices are just going up in gas, coal, uranium, everything is going up. And the second one is how do we make sure that we are able to produce energy with no emission. And so on one hand, there can be mechanisms of carbon capturing, but more importantly, how can we produce energy without having to emit CO2? And no doubt, I agree with Elon that nuclear is a solution that exists. It's one that we know. It's one that is secure, and one that we should absolutely develop strongly. And if you think about why uranium prices are going up, which means that there is nuclearization in the world, it's because countries like China and India are actually nuclearizing. And that is a very strong indication of also what we should do, as in parallel, we do work very strongly on renewable, and I think that ultimately the sun, which is the biggest source of energy, is going to be the long-term solution.
Do you agree on that, Elon?
Yeah, I think very much so. Solar energy is often underestimated, but the Earth would be just a cold, dark ice ball at 3 degrees above absolute zero if it was not for the sun. And the sun also powers almost the entire ecosystem. From the sun powers the plants and the plankton, and then from there the whole ecosystem above, plants and plankton. So you can think of really Earth as being already almost entirely solar powered, and so but then there's like a little bit of extra power that's needed to power human civilization, which is small compared to the total solar incidence on Earth. The solar energy on Earth is approximately a gigawatt per square kilometer. And if you wanted to, say, power all of Europe with solar, you would only need a fairly small piece of land, but in reality, it would be distributed over many pieces of land, so you don't have to have too many long power lines. But basically, like as a rough guide, about 200 kilometers by 200 kilometers of solar would power all of Europe. Maybe even a little bit less, but comfortably 200 kilometers by 200 kilometers of solar would power all of Europe. So, this could be a combination of land within Europe or perhaps just across the Mediterranean, where there's a lot of sun. But basically there's so much solar that you could very, very easily, with a very small patch of land, relatively speaking, power all of Europe, all of the world, in fact. So this is important to appreciate, that only a very small portion of the world would need to have solar panels to power all of civilization, and then an even smaller piece of land would be required for the batteries required to store that solar energy overnight, so that you can have energy at night and during the day.
Coming to the new horizons of life, Neuralink is a developing brain-computer neural interfaces. How can human beings interact with machine, Elon?
Sure. So, the full story of Neuralink is quite complicated. The overarching goal of Neuralink is to mitigate the AI control risk, so that as AI gets smarter and smarter, we need to do something to enhance the bandwidth between ourselves and the machine extension of ourselves. Like, we are already a cyborg to some degree, in that our phones and our laptops and our computer applications are an extension of ourselves. But the bandwidth to the computers, especially to the phone, is very slow, where we essentially are outputting with thumbs, two slow-moving thumbs. This is a very low bandwidth situation. So I think from an existential threat standpoint, Neuralink is aimed at improving human-machine symbiosis, with the idea of ensuring that humanity can have a good coexistence with artificial intelligence. Now, in the short term, over the next several years, Neuralink will attempt to solve a number of brain injuries and brain diseases. So our first application, for example, is to enable someone who is a quadriplegic or tetraplegic to be able to control their computer or their phone just by thinking. And we've already demonstrated this actually with a monkey that can play video games and use a mouse cursor and click on things on a computer. And so we're very confident this will work. And hopefully we'll have our first human trials in the next 6 months or so.
It's a fascinating scenario. John, how do you see the cyborg world?
Well, I think that we are in a decade where we're going to see the evolution of our smartphones, which is the first application of being cyborgs, change. And how will that object evolve? You could argue that it's going to be with, we have all these glasses that are going to allow us to use AR and VR technologies, or as an extension of what Neuralink is doing, we could actually ourselves be enabled with technology. But as I reflect on all of these evolutions and how we humans can work and cooperate more with machines, what I also find very interesting, and the avenue that all of this could open, is if we think about our relationship with nature, aren't these technologies also going to help us understand better nature? And if you could actually communicate with your dog or with your trees, wouldn't that open up a whole universe?
Sure.
It's a window on the future opportunities that we may.
Do you want to share the animal Elon, that the Neuralink team would be most excited in communicating with?
Well, I think the things that animals want to communicate with, as far as we can tell, tend to be fairly straightforward. Probably monkeys are the most sophisticated. But I think you could communicate with your dog, I suppose. Although I think I know what my dog would want. He only wants like about 4 different things. It's like food, water, go outside, and be petted. But maybe there's more to it than that. Maybe he has a secret life of dogs that we just don't know that exists.
We may discover it very soon.
Yeah.
This conference was made to inspire and empower anyone who believes in a future where technology and innovation expand human possibilities. You both are fathers with strong relations with your kids. What future do you see for them, John?
Well, I'm very optimistic about the future, and I think that our species has been able to overcome difficulties as they come, and the last example of it is what we all have been living through this pandemic, and it's extraordinary to see the resourcefulness and how we've come together to mitigate the risks and finding practical solutions to be able to solve problems and advance. And this is what gives me a huge amount of optimism combined, we're really seeing younger generations. So if I think about my kids, their friends, or also all the young women and men that I've interacted with yesterday and today, and how clever they are, and also their ambition in being forces of good, that gives me a lot of confidence in our future.
Elon?
Yeah, I also I believe one should be optimistic about the future. I'm generally of the view, philosophically, that it's better to be optimistic and wrong occasionally than pessimistic and right. I think you want to look on the bright side of things, and I'm a little worried that young people today maybe sometimes are a little pessimistic about the future, but I'd like to just assure people that so long as we are not complacent, we will solve the climate crisis, and we will solve these issues. We obviously need to take them seriously and work hard to solve them. They will be solved, and that people should be optimistic about the future and work to make that optimistic future real. They say that the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so if you take the actions necessary for there to be a good future, then we will have a good future. So I'd encourage people to be optimistic, take the actions that will create a good future, and we will have one.
Thank you, Elon. We got a few questions from the audience. The first one is for you both. How do you learn? What is your way to process information to make the right question and find the answer? John?
Well, I'm very eager to learn and have had the good fortune of being exposed to many different situations, out of which I've always found that by doing, you learn. But more importantly, I think that interaction with people and going to sources of knowledge, and there are incredible masters, teachers that you can learn from. And as you have those interactions, I agree that the questions, like how you ask, what you ask, and being genuinely interested. Now, you have the risk of some people asking questions because they like to hear what they're asking, but if you genuinely want to hear the answer, that's been for me the biggest learning opportunity I've had, Maurizio.
Elon?
Yeah, I think you really want to try to learn at every opportunity, and it's great to read books and talk to interesting people and learn as much as possible. I suppose it was I don't know, Plato or someone who said, or maybe attributed to Socrates, if I know anything, it's that I know nothing. And so essentially, just taking that attitude that really we wish to be less foolish over time. But I think it's actually, if you accept the premise that you're a fool, then, which we are all a fool to some degree, then I think that, and you wish to be less foolish, then I think that's a good approach, and this avoids, that maximizes your feedback loop and your ability to learn. As soon as you start thinking you know too much, and people can't teach you things, that's when you start getting very dumb. I always try to learn new things and being able to talk to interesting people, and you can often learn more by the questions that are asked than the answers that are given.
A question for Elon Musk. Suppose to be 20 years old right now, where would you start your path from?
I mean, if I was literally if I was just a 20-year-old right now in 2021, if I was 21 in 2021.
From where would you start?
Well, I mean, assuming that I'm still a technologist, then I think there's a lot of opportunity in synthetic RNA. The vaccines that were developed, apart from the ones that were done by BioNTech and Moderna, are really the beginning of what I call digital medicine, or medicine and software. And I think that's, I would say, what's the single biggest opportunity I see right now? It's probably synthetic RNA and the potential for revolutionizing medicine in that way. There's also artificial intelligence. There's one of my favorites which is tunnels. We need a lot of tunnels to address the traffic in major cities. And then there's obviously the continued electrification of transport with aircraft and boats, in addition to cars. Let's see. There's many other things that will come up as well. So I think we live at a very exciting time. If you look at the whole history of the world and humanity, this is a time of the greatest technological growth in history. And it seems to be accelerating.
A question for John Elkann. Will we ever see an autonomous Ferrari car?
Well, that would be sad to have a Ferrari autonomous car, as the essence of having a Ferrari is to be able to drive it. And I think that in a world where autonomy will capture a bigger part of how we move, the value of driving will increase. So if we go by analogy, when we had horses and carriages, stallions existed too, and racehorses existed. But as those disappeared, stallions and racehorses continue to exist and are very valuable and very appreciated. So to some extent, that's where I think Ferrari is and should continue being.
Yeah, I agreed. It's on the logo.
We have time for just two short final questions. Elon Musk, it has been reported that you consider yourself not a CEO, but an engineer for the ability of problem solving. How do you find these skills in your candidates, people that want to work with you?
How do I find engineering skills with
the ability of problem solving?
Oh, yeah. Generally, my interview generally consists of just asking people to tell me the story of their career, and in particular, to go into depth on some of the toughest problems that they've solved and how they solved them. And then that gives me pretty good insight into what they can do. And then I'll generally ask them, detailed questions about some problem that they solved technologically, and that will tell me if they were really responsible or not. Because whoever was actually responsible for solving the problem, they remember it very well. It's like seared into their brain. That's I think a good sort of filter for, okay, who really deserves credit for a problem and who does not, if they can answer the small detailed questions. Yeah.
Then we have a very crucial question, by the way, about semiconductors, the crisis of semiconductor production. Is a short-term or a long-term standing?
Short-term, I think. Yes, short-term. There's a lot of chip fabrication plants that are being built, and I think we will have good capacity for providing chips by next year, I think. I certainly hope so, but it appears that way.
And finally, Elon, do you want to tell something else about your relation with Italy, and if you will invest in Italy as one of the members of the public asked us?
Sure. Well, I think I love Italy. It's great. In fact, I asked Mauro, who is head of the heat shield technology at SpaceX, to join, and he's from Italy. So Mauro, if you could join.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi. I'm ready to become in Italian.
Buonanotte.
Yeah.
Good morning. Waking up. Sorry.
But you can speak in Italian, though.
Yeah. Buongiorno.
Buongiorno.
So, Mauro, actually, you came from a small village, right?
Yeah, I came from a small village in the north of Piemonte, in Valdossola, Valformazza.
Which is in the same region Torino is in.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah, but I think it's funny, just think about, you grew up in, and your family's been there for a long time.
Yeah, like several hundred years.
Several hundred years in the village.
Yes.
And then you decided you wanted to work on technology.
Yeah, and just decided to explore opportunities. So went to University in Milan, then went to Caltech in California, and then I stayed at NASA, and then I realized the rate of learning was a little slow. So I'm very happy to be joined SpaceX for several years and work together.
Can you tell us what he does in your team?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Basically,
should Mauro talk in Italian for a bit? Or
that would be great. That would be wonderful.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm responsible for the development of vehicles.
Quando stanno a 20-25 Mach devono fermarsi senza distruggersi, senza.
So when they have to stop and burn. And so I develop materials, how to create them, how to reuse them.
è anche ispirato dalla ceramica, no?
And also you have the true inspiration from ceramics, is that right? Yes, we're making these tiles, hexagonal black tiles that you probably have seen on Starship. And we learned how they make tiles in Imola, Sassuolo, Italy, also how they are painting the panels of Italian kitchens, and how you can reconvert facilities that were making condensed milk to recover acid that was used to purify the fibers, and how to use oil tanks to grind fibers that we bought in Bari. So we put together many things and we've learned from many years of history.
I was telling them that I use like the system to recover acid is basically a milk condensing plant that we bought in Croatia, and we actually bought it in Scotland, but it was previously used in Croatia.
But like for we're making some of the most advanced heat shield technology, in fact, the most technology in the world. But we're using a lot of techniques that are also developed for roofing tiles.
Yeah.
And a lot of those techniques were developed in Italy, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Learning from everybody you can learn from.
There is great pride in the room here of knowing that part of Italy is also with SpaceX, and a lot of eagerness of being able to participate more and doing more to that end.
Yep.
Thank you.
Very happy to be here.
Now?
And I hope that you guys will come to Torino next year to be able to see how ideally we can do more. And Torino is the capital of space of Italy, and it's also the capital of cars, which are two important passions for Elon. But we had prepared also Torino being the capital of chocolate, and knowing you like Peirano chocolate,
Sure.
we have this very special space chocolate that will be waiting for you when you come next time.
All right. I look forward to being there in person.
Very good. Thank you, Elon.
Grazie.
Thank you, John Elkann. Thank you to your extraordinary Italian assistants, and thank you all for having been with us today.
All right. Great. Thanks. Good to talk to you. Bye.
Buonanotte.
Buonanotte.
Grazie, Riccardo.
Grazie a voi, bellissimo. Allora, ci siamo chiesti a lungo.
Very well. We've wondered what could come after the dialogue between Elon Musk and Dialogue, and some said nothing.